A man, impaled on a slab of stone with rebars skewering through him, was surrounded by countless zombies closing in. Rick desperately struggled to break free, but his strength seemed useless. Slowly, his consciousness began to blur. When Rick regained consciousness, he found himself lying in a hospital bed. Gazing at his former self lying there, it was as if he was trapped in a loop. The current Rick was wounded in the abdomen. Once again.
Yeah, wake up, asshole.
Suddenly, Rick snapped awake from his dream. The zombie horde had come to a place only 2 or 3 meters away from him. He tried to free himself, but his efforts were futile. As he gazed at the distant horde of zombies, Rick remained calm and contemplated every possible solution. Finally, he swiftly removed his belt and looped it around the rebar jutting from his head. The convergence of these 2 massive hordes would be an immensely terrifying force. Enduring the pain, Rick laboriously climbed onto the back of a horse. The white horse is also in a state of shock and panic, almost walking into the zombies. Thankfully, Rick tightly pulled the reins, turned the horse around, and managed to escape the danger, but the bumps on the back of the horse made Rick's wounds painful. Coupled with the loss of blood may at any time unconsciousness, Rick can only use the perseverance to hold on to not fall down. On the road not far from there, a car broke down and came to a stop. It was Jodi's. She left without saying goodbye. At this moment, the mysterious person contacted Jodi's through the radio, inquiring about her location and the status of Item A. Jodi's had spared Gabriel, so she had no bargaining chip in her hands. Yet, she replied that she had prepared Item A for him on an empty space by the riverbank. Jodi's was unsure where to find another item now, but she had an alternative plan in mind. Rick continued riding the horse, his blood staining the horse's back. Rick's consciousness began to blur again, as if he was seeing the farm he used to live on, the scene before the disaster when he was shot, and the hospital. But Rick came round in time. The white horse nearly lost direction again, prompting Rick to suppress the excruciating pain and urge the horse to run once more. After a while, the blood from Rick's abdomen had clotted. He was pushing forward solely on willpower. Thankfully, he reached a crossroads. Rick once again lifted up his spirit and quickly ran in the direction of the side road. Escaping from the zombies was the ultimate goal. After walking for a while, Rick finally reached a small house. Rick just wanted to go in and hide for a while, even if he had time to treat his wounds. The first thing Rick did upon entering was not to check for zombies but to quickly grab a piece of cloth and tightly wrap it around his waist. Otherwise, even if he managed to escape being eaten by zombies, he might still succumb to excessive bleeding. With this makeshift bandage secured, Rick leaned back in a chair and drifted into a deep sleep. In his dream, Rick saw himself riding a white horse once again, just like his first time in Atlanta. However, this time he was followed by thousands of zombies. He saw the same crumbling city. Waiting for him was his good friend Shane. Sitting together as they used to, chatting and enjoying hamburgers, Shane playfully inquired about Rick's beloved daughter, Judith, and whether her eyes resembled his. Instead of anger, Rick responded with banter, as if they had returned to their days of duty together. They let go of their past conflicts and reconciled. Rick woke up abruptly. Zombies already pouncing on him. Fortunately, he regained consciousness in time to push them away and use a table as a barrier to break through the boarded-up door, allowing him to escape. Thankfully, the decayed state of the wooden planks made them brittle enough for Rick to break through. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stood a chance in his current state. The zombie horde is so powerful it can crush anything. Rick struggled to mount the horse and dashed into the nearby woods. On the other side, Maggie had successfully reached the Alexandria safe zone. She intended to go to the basement and kill Negan, but Michonne intervened. As Rick's wife, Michonne felt responsible for looking out for his interests. Maggie, however, brushed aside Michonne's reasoning and told her plainly that she only wanted to do one thing: see the killer of Glenn dead. "Are you trying to take this right from me?" she asked Michonne. "What if Negan had killed Rick instead of Glenn?" She continued, "What would you do then? If your child was born without a father because of that monster, I bet you'd have killed Negan long ago. So don't pretend that I have a choice. Don't pretend that I can let go of this hatred. I want to ask you, who can let go?" Michonne listened without knowing how to respond. As a woman, she knew exactly how Maggie felt. In the end, Michonne handed over the keys and decided not to interfere any longer. She had no reason to stop Maggie. Maggie meets Negan again in the cell and the guy is still calm. Negan overhears their conversation and knows that Maggie is here to kill him. Instead of begging for mercy, Negan recounted the gruesome details of Glenn's death and taunted, "Did you finally muster up the courage to come here? Took you long enough. Maggie was filled with anger. She told Negan to kneel down and die. Surprisingly, Negan cooperated with Maggie and told her to hurry up and do it. Now Maggie is a bit confused. Is it possible that Negan has some kind of conspiracy? Negan continued to beg Maggie to end his life. Over and over.
You kill me!
Move into the light.
Maggie could no longer bear it and swung the door open, rushing in to throw Negan out. Negan had been locked up for over a year, and his health wasn't what it used to be. During this time, his mental state had also deteriorated. He could die in battle, but he didn't want to rot in this little house.
Please kill me.
Why?
So I can be with Lucille! I have to be dead. I can't be like this. And it's supposed to be you. I should be dead. It has to be you. Just settle it. I can't do it. I've tried. I can't. Please don't make me stay like this. Settle me. Kill me.
Get back in your cell.
Maggie's heart was heavy, fueled with anger. She had expected to finally bring closure today, but looking at Negan, who was as good as dead, Maggie suddenly didn't want to do anything. Why should she help this guy out? He doesn't deserve it.
You're already worse than dead. That settles it.
Negan entered the cell again, muttering some words. Gone was the dominant figure he once portrayed. Instead, he seemed like an old man on the brink of salvation. Maggie walked out of the basement. Michonne, who was waiting outside, hadn't heard any sounds of struggle. Furthermore, there was no blood on Maggie's weapon, which left Michonne puzzled. Approaching Michonne, Maggie locked eyes with her. Maggie's furrowed brow was relaxed. Her mind was open. They haven't had a chance to say anything.
Maggie, Michonne, something's up with you.
Rick's side is still holding up. The zombies continue to follow him. Rick would love to just ignore it and sleep, but deep in his heart there was always a voice telling him that he could not fall now. He had to lure them away. But soon, the sensation of dizziness overcame him once again. This time, Rick was on horseback, passed out, and in his sleep he returned to that beautiful farm. He met Hershel, the respected elder. Rick opened up about the hardships of his journey, pouring out his grievances as if speaking to a parent, sharing all the bitterness and hardships.
I'm so sorry for what happened to you. For everything Maggie's lost. To Beth and Glenn.
My girl, she's strong. And my grandson, he'll only make her stronger. I need to find my family. You ain't gotta worry about her. I need to keep them together. I know it's been hard. No, you don't. It is.
Everything Rick had done had been for his family, but now his wife is dead, Carl is dead, Glenn and Shane are all dead.
Maybe I can find them here. You have to wake up.
Awakening from this vision, Rick glanced around and realized that the situation was still dire. Waking up wouldn't magically make everything better. Before he could take more than a few steps, Rick collapsed again. This time, his consciousness returned to the hospital. Standing before that same door, the sign on the door read, "Do not open, zombies inside." The previous Rick had been scared away, but now he wanted to open it and see. But as soon as he opened the door, a white light enveloped Rick so he couldn't see what was inside. But Rick chose to go in anyway. When his vision cleared, the scene before him was shocking, a space filled with countless bodies. At his feet lay Negan, Tyrese, Hershel, and even Carol, Jodies, Michonne, all of them dead. Rick walks amongst them, and for a moment he's lost. Throughout his life, Rick had fought for his family, for his friends, but in the end, they were all gone. Why had this happened? At that moment, a figure appeared behind Rick, a person who had long since passed away. Sasha.
They're all dead.
It's okay.
How can it be okay?
Yeah. I know.
How can this be okay?
Sasha told Rick that he didn't need to blame himself, for he had done all he could, just like she had, like those who had sacrificed before them. Everyone had given their all. Listening to Sasha's comforting words, Rick's tormented heart eased somewhat.
What you need to do It's about all of us, is wake up.
Back in reality, Rick fell from the horse. The white horse had disappeared into the forest, struggling to his feet. Rick looked around and realized that the horse had brought him back to the campsite, but this time, there were only lifeless bodies. He didn't see Carol and the others. Rick's original intention was to lead the zombie horde away from the campsite and the bridge. However, the white horse had led him here instead. His wound was still bleeding. A few familiar zombies came into Rick's view, the Savior's workers. The previous gunfire had evidently taken its toll. The zombies came towards Rick. He could only pick up his pistol and aim at the first zombie that came near him, then the second. The third zombie was a member of Oceanside. Many followed Rick because of his indomitable spirit. Others would have perished by now. Noticing the trees in the distance rustling, Rick realized that the horde had caught up. There's nothing but tall trees that can withstand it for a moment. Rick was exhausted and yearned to rest, but it wasn't the time. He had to keep moving with his grievous injury. Without his white horse, Rick's speed was slow. The zombies were hot on his heels. If Rick ran out of strength or fainted again, he would be devoured by the countless zombies.